Thank you for joining us on the Wrestling Talks and Thoughts channel. It's your main man, Saheem the Dream, where we primarily talk about wrestling content, and we want to hear from you. That's right, you, the wrestling fans, as we post monthly wrestling content videos, and also as we go live every Tuesday at 10 p.m. and every Sunday at 12 p.m. and discuss wrestling content. Also, you guys can join us on Facebook Live, and also join us on Facebook and join the Facebook group and the Facebook page as well. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and also hit that notification bell for all new video uploads. Also, drop a comment in the comment section below as we talk wrestling and we want to know your thoughts. I would like to send a special shout out and thank you to everybody who checked out the video of the greatest heel in WWE history. I definitely appreciate your comments and your feedback on the video. It's well appreciated. Also, if you guys have not had the opportunity to check out the video, the greatest heel in WWE history, give it a watch. And also drop a comment in the comment section below and let me know who you think is your favorite heel in WWE history. All right, now guys, let's get into the video. From 1963 all the way up into the year 2022, we've had approximately 146 WWE champions. 146 WWE superstars who would hold on to the WWE championship, have their moment in the sun, their moment in glory, to establish a legacy in WWE. But out of 146 champions, I decided to narrow it down to about 10 of the most important, monumental WWE champions of all times. That's right, this list will be about the top 10 WWE champions of all times. I have looked at all the champions and looked at how many people have ranked their favorite champion or who they thought was the greatest champion or believed to be the best champion of all time or who should be considered the GOAT. Everybody has their reasons and everybody has their views. And I'm totally okay with that. If you have your personal choice and who you think is the greatest champion of all times, so be it. I am one to not argue with you because you have your reason. You may have started watching wrestling because of that particular champion, because of that one superstar. But see, here's the thing. As I would look at multiple videos or have multiple conversations or hear different conversations about who's ranked to be the #1 champion or who's ranked in the top 5 or the top 10, what I noticed is that there was never any real logical ranking. Like, what are they being ranked by? Are they being ranked by the memories they made, promo skills? You know, are they being ranked by what they established as a champion? And all those things come into play and are major factors as being a WWE champion. And that's what we need to look at. Who were these game changers? These points are important because this is pretty much based upon what the superstar established as being a champion. We're going solely based upon what they did upon pursuing the championship, passing off the championship, or having the championship. Like, what did they do in those time frames, right? I'm going to mention some of the backstage politics that prevented them from doing monumental things. Pretty much give you some insight as to, you know, how every champion did partake in some backstage politics, but then also show you how them using the backstage politics prevented them from actually making or taking monumental steps and being considered or possibly really considered the GOAT. Without further ado, we're going to get into the video. But first, before we get into the video, I'm going to introduce you guys into a grade card system. So the grade card system is going to be me grading all 10 superstars based upon these 5 things. All right, so the first thing would be their promo skills, which would be involving their charisma, the ability to connect with the crowd, selling their character, or selling their feuds. The second thing would be feuds, who had the best feuds, either holding the title, pursuing the title, or defending the championship. The third thing would be championship reigns, who had the best championship reigns, or who was able to accomplish the most while being a champion, who won it or who lost it against a worthy adversary, which will lead into passing the torch, but we'll get into that later. The fourth thing would be era, who had the best era or who was able to usher in a new era. Like, what superstar ushered in a different era, like how Austin ushered in the Attitude Era, you know, Hulk Hogan ushered in the Golden Era, like that sort of thing. Like, when that wrestler obtained that championship, did a new era come upon us as fans? And number 5, last but not least, would be passing of the torch, allowing another babyface or heel to win clean without any interruptions, which would be like, somebody trying to interrupt the match, or them getting like a low blow, or somebody from the outside distracting the referee so that they can get the win, or pretty much any outside shenanigans that prevented the match from being a fair victory, like a clean victory. They just went inside the ring, had a match for the heavyweight championship, and that babyface lost to that newcomer or that next in line. But this really applies to like a babyface being at the top of their game, at the top of their era, and them just, relinquishing the title to another heel or to another babyface, knowing that they can help elevate the business and elevate that superstar and put them over and increase the entertainment value and credibility of that superstar. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Alright, so coming in at number 10, I have Superstar Billy Graham. His promo skills are ranked a 4, feuds a 3, championship reigns a 4, era a 4, and passing of the torch 3. And here is the reason for his ranking. His promo skills are ranked a 4 because he had a lot of charisma. He was a great heel who knew how to provoke and work the crowd. He was cocky, he was brash, he was arrogant. He constantly flexed and showed off his muscles and told you how much of a macho man he was. He was the epitome of a heel. His charisma and the macho character that he displayed in his promo work was enough to earn him a championship reign as a heel at the top of the mountain. Superstar Billy Graham wouldn't have many notable feuds, but the feud that he was mainly known for was his feud with Bruno Sammartino. His championship reign was ranked as a 4. Reason being is because he would be the first major heel to have a lengthy title run in the WWE. That was monumental. Why was it so monumental? It's because he was in a bygone era. At that time, only babyfaces reigned supreme, and most of the people who came to the shows wanted to see babyfaces as their champion. And he was a heel that was maintaining the crowd that WWE had already established with Bruno Sammartino. As far as era rating, I give him a 4. And that's the reason why I give him a 4, is because he was a major heel who held the title for a lengthy time. Him being a major heel at that time, holding that belt, would now usher in a time period in WWE where they would put the belts on major heels and give them some time to reign with the belt. He'll be one of the top heels in the wide wrestling world that would introduce the idea of heels being highly liked over babyfaces. As far as passing the torch, I give him a 3. He was a heel. He was supposed to pass it on to another babyface. In fact, the babyface he would pass it on to would be Bob Backlund, the very man that he would put in training to be the next babyface to take over the reins as champion for Bruno Sammartino, giving us Superstar Billy Graham a heel or somewhat transitional champion, but then having a lengthy reign with the title because of his likability as a heel. Coming in at number 9, I have the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. His promos a 5, feuds a 5, championship reign a 3, era a 4, and passing of the torch a 3. And here is the reason for the scores on his card. His promo skills is an automatic 5. Shawn Michaels was one of the best promo workers in the business. You could look up some of Shawn Michaels' old promo work to this day and still get a great laugh. The charisma, the comfortability, the confidence that he poured in every single interview can be measured among the best. And he ranks at the top, especially with his work that he's done with DX, taunting the Canadian crowd, his opponents such as Stone Cold Steve Austin, Bret the Hitman Hart, and The Undertaker. If you go back and look at some of the segments leading up to some of his matches, you'll be stuck for hours and purely entertained and getting some of the greatest laughs that you've ever experienced in pro wrestling history. As far as his feuds are concerned, his most notable are Stone Cold Steve Austin, Bret the Hitman Hart, The Undertaker, Mankind, and Sid Vicious. But of course, his most popular is Bret Hart. I rated him a 5 because, of course, we all know about the Montreal Screwjob, we all know about his feud with The Undertaker, and we all know about his feud with Mankind. But he definitely deserves that 5 rating. As far as championship reigns, I gave him a 3. Only thing Shawn Michaels was really trying to establish was himself as a top performer and to prove to Vince McMahon that smaller guys can go like bigger guys and they can sell tickets just as much as bigger guys. It was up to Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, and a few others to try to pull in more clientele or to try to retain the same clientele that Hulk Hogan had brought in while he was the major babyface. But however, as a top performer, he proved himself to be considered possibly the greatest in-ring performer in WWE history. As far as era is concerned, I gave him a 4. Reason being was because he was one of the main contributors to the Attitude Era, considered one of, if not the greatest era in WWE or wrestling history. He wouldn't form DX while he was WWE champion, but upon becoming WWE champion, he had formed DX. While being WWE champion, he was still in the group DX, and they would cut some of the greatest promos ever. And part of him cutting those great promos contributed to the Attitude Era. His silly, cocky, careless attitude as a champion and as a member of DX will go on to create some of the greatest segments ever seen on television. The Attitude Era would prove to be that secret sauce that WWE needed in order to compete with the competition, WCW, during the Monday Night Wars. As far as passing the torch, I give Shawn Michaels a 3. The reason being is because Shawn Michaels did, however, pass the torch on to Stone Cold Steve Austin before taking his sabbatical to nurse his back injury. However, he would be very reluctant to drop the heavyweight championship to Stone Cold Steve Austin at that WrestleMania, having been threatened by The Undertaker to show up at the main event and to drop the heavyweight championship to Stone Cold Steve Austin. He actually did drop the belt to Stone Cold Steve Austin. He should be getting a 5 because he actually did pass the torch. However, he receives a 3 because of the Montreal Screwjob. At number 8, I have Bret the Hitman Hart. I rated Bret Hart's promos a 5, his feuds a 5, his championship reign a 3, era 4, and passing the torch. I honestly wanted to rate Bret higher on this list, but I couldn't, simply because of what Bret did as a champion and as far as what he was trying to establish as far as what would be considered monumental. And Bret didn't do anything really monumental as a champion other than just proving that he could be a top performer. The same thing as Shawn. They were just trying to prove that they could be top performers as smaller guys compared to bigger guys like Hogan. Keep in mind, there were smaller champions, or there were champions or guys who were about their size, 6'1", 6'2", who had held on to the WWE Championship, like Bob Backlund, like Iron Sheik. But they were solely trying to convince Vince McMahon that smaller guys can be bigger draws. And Vince McMahon, in his mind, thought only bigger guys were draws. Bret's promo skills I give a 5 because he was always great on the mic. Even though he was a clean-cut role model who always wanted kids to look up to him like the superhero type like Bruno Sammartino or Bob Backlund, Bret still was great on the mic and had some of the best promos you will ever hear from a babyface, hands down. And he was able to go head-to-head with anybody he was competing with and really sell a feud or sell a match. As far as feuds, I gave him a 5 because he had some great notable feuds. Yokozuna, Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, Bob Backlund, Ric Flair. Those are his most notable feuds as WWE champion. If I'm missing any, you guys can drop in the comment section below. And I had to give him a 5 because of his rich history with Shawn Michaels feuding over the WWE Championship and being the top guy in the business. And of course, his feud with Yokozuna, the feud that made him look like a hero before all of the fans. The feud that pretty much made him that real big superstar. Championship reign, I give him a 3 because he was only trying to establish himself as a top performer. He didn't do anything monumental as a champion. I give him a 4 because he was part of the New Generation era and also a part of kickstarting the Attitude Era. So I had to give him a 4 because he was one of the catalysts for the Attitude Era and the New Generation. As far as passing the torch, I give him a 5. The reason why I give him a 5 is because he passed on that belt to Shawn Michaels, which helped catapult Shawn Michaels into being a megastar. Coming in at number 7, I have John Cena. This one right here is a doozy. For John Cena's rating, his promo work I give a 3, his feuds a 5, his championship reigns a 3, his era a 2, and passing the torch I give him a 4. Let's get into the rating system and why I gave him the ratings that I gave him and why he's placed at number 7. Okay, so as far as John Cena's promo work, when John Cena first came out as the Doctor of Thugonomics, his promo work was an A+. But it was like after he won the World Heavyweight Championship, he cut out the whole Doctor of Thugonomics gimmick and he went strictly to just cutting plain Jane promos. Like he had no pizzazz, no charisma in any of his promos and just stuck to, I wouldn't say stuck to, but just rode off the laurels of what he already created. The point that I'm making is that when you compare his promos to all the greats or the ones that came before him, he does not measure up. He should have easily gotten a 5. I'm just as heartbroken about giving him this 3 when I should be giving him a 5 because I was a John Cena fan. I was completely heartbroken and completely, disappointed in this person that I put high expectations into entertaining me every Monday and every Thursday, and they give me a half-ass job. Not even a half-ass, just like a terrible job. As far as John Cena's feuds, the reason why I gave him a 5 is because his most notable feuds, of course, Chris Jericho, Edge, Randy Orton, Triple H, The Rock. Like, he had great feuds and he feuded with the right people. As far as championship reign, I give him a 3. He didn't establish anything monumental as far as being a WWE champion, only just doing the same thing that Bret Hart did, Shawn Michaels did, Bob Backlund did as champion, and that was just streamlining the era that he came out of. My point that I'm trying to make with John Cena is that as far as his championship reign, compared to all the greats, he didn't do anything really monumental or game-changing other than be a great ambassador. But Hogan was a great ambassador. Bruno Sammartino was a great ambassador. When we talk about his championship reign, and as far as his quality of entertainment decreasing, that's why his rating is so low. As far as era, he created the PG era, which was a destruction of the Ruthless Aggression era and the destruction of the Attitude era. I had to give him a 2. During the PG era, there was nothing really entertaining about it other than the few good feuds that we got here and there and DX. That's the only thing that we really got. The sad thing about it was that the PG era would undo what the Attitude era and the Ruthless Aggression era and the Golden era had already tried to establish, and that was build a strong following and a core fan base and keep them constantly entertained and cultured over the years in WWE entertainment. As far as passing the torch, one thing I definitely have to say about John Cena is that John Cena never had an issue passing over or putting over other superstars. But at that point in his career, John Cena had no choice but to do that because as him being a big WWE babyface and main franchise and champion, he wasn't making that much of an impact as the greats were. The reason why I have him so high on the list, even though I have more negatives than positives, is because John Cena did at some point keep WWE afloat with ratings and being the leader of the PG era. John Cena is definitely one of the most polarizing figures in pro wrestling entertainment. One of the most, I should say. But I almost came up with like an hour of content just talking about him as far as his slot on the list. So I am going to make a separate video focusing on John Cena's career and questioning whether he is the GOAT or not. Stay tuned for that video. But we're going to move on to the next person on this list, and that is number 6, CM Punk. Now, for CM Punk's ratings, I give his promo work a 5, his feuds a 4, his championship reigns a 5, his era a 5, and passing of the torch a 3. Now, let's break down his rating card. CM Punk's promo work is an automatic 5. Of course, we all know about the infamous pipe bomb segment on an episode of Monday Night Raw, but besides that, when CM Punk was with the Straight Edge Society, his promo work was really good. CM Punk, beside that, working up to the infamous pipe bomb gimmick, his mic work was somewhat good, or mediocre, but it was good. It was better than most on the roster. But however, after that infamous pipe bomb gimmick on an episode of Monday Night Raw, that's when his mic work pretty much just skyrocketed. It was through the roof. Like, he was really genuinely speaking from the core, from his heart. he was able to say what he wanted to say and spoke freely. Now, as far as feuds are concerned, his most notable feuds while being WWE champion or upon obtaining the WWE championship would be against John Cena, and also his feud with Ryback and his feud with The Rock upon losing the WWE championship, and also his feud with Chris Jericho. Other than that, while being champion, he didn't have, many notable feuds really. If you guys know about any feuds that CM Punk had while being WWE heavyweight champion, please drop it in the comment section below. I'm forgetting some, but as far as his most notable feuds, I think I mentioned them already. Now, this is funny because as far as his feuds are concerned and as far as his championship reign, that kind of bleeds in together because, we really wasn't concerned at the time about, who he was kind of really feuding with. We couldn't really care who he really feuded with. We just wanted him to have the belt at the time because it's what he represented as a champion, which leads us into his championship reign. His championship reign, I give a 5 because it's what he stood for. He stood for the guys who were being looked over, who were not given the proper opportunity based on Vince McMahon bias of, looking for a bigger guy or them not fitting the mold of what he wanted in a superstar. CM Punk really stood for those guys like Zack Ryder, Cesaro, Dolph Ziggler, and many others backstage who were somewhat seen as potential but not really given that actual push in the spotlight. However, CM Punk would be one of those fortunate ones to be pushed in the spotlight. Even though he was a smaller guy, CM Punk would be given that same opportunity, but yet he would try to use his position of power to try to show the injustice in which WWE was now giving towards their own talent. That in itself was monumental because at that time we were in the PG era, and CM Punk would be the one to now push or begin to initiate that push out of the PG era. So speaking of era, CM Punk's era rating gets a 5 because CM Punk would now begin to push us out of the PG era. It was interesting because during the PG era, it was like every time you seen CM Punk on the screen, we were getting a break from the PG era. But it was almost like when he had the championship, we were not in the PG era. During that time he had the championship, things began to get a little bit more entertaining. So I definitely give his era rating a 5 rating because while CM Punk was a champion, we were not in the PG era at all. Like, it felt different. It felt like the WWE was trying to transition into something new. What CM Punk did was monumental because he called out the business owner Vince McMahon on his constant oppression and suppression of his own talent. And that in itself provoked change. And that in itself provoked a new era. And that in itself was, of course, a game changer. Coming in at number 5, I have Bruno Sammartino. Now, this is Bruno Sammartino's rating. His promos, I give a 2. His feuds, a 4. Championship reigns, a 5. His era, a 5. And passing of the torch, I give a 3. Let's break down the reason why I gave him the ratings I gave him. Bruno Sammartino's promo work was nothing special, nothing revolutionary, nothing that really changed the game, nothing that kind of really sold you into you wanting to watch him as a heavyweight champion. However, the fans were behind Bruno Sammartino based on, the kind of macho man character and figure and look that he had as far as being a contender and a competitor. His promos were straight to the point, nothing really special, no real charisma. I mean, they were just really straight to the point, but a lot of the fans were really just sold on Bruno's look, his size, and ever since he won the heavyweight championship from Buddy Rogers, they were just sold on him being their guy or their top champion, or pretty much the guy that they enjoy rooting for. During Bruno Sammartino's illustrious title reigns, he will go on to have some notable feuds, some with Ernie Ladd, Larry Zbyszko, Superstar Billy Graham, Ivan Koloff, and also Buddy Rogers. As far as championship reigns are concerned, I rated him a 5 because one of his championship reigns lasted at least 8 years, and then his second, I believe it was 3 years. But however, he would go on to be the premier babyface of WWE, and his championship reigns was so popular and would go on to sell out Madison Square Garden a staggering 188 times. That's more than any other individual performer in history. Why is this so impressive? Because in New York, there's a popular saying, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. And New York is no easy crowd to put over, making it pretty much one of the toughest crowds in the world. As far as era is concerned, I give him a 5. The reason being is because he set the groundwork or set the template for the first major babyface in WWE history. He was the first major babyface. He was the first major sellout for WWE. He would be the guy who would be a precursor to Hulk Hogan, John Cena, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and other major babyfaces. Bruno Sammartino didn't do anything really spectacular or revolutionary other than just lay the groundwork of being a major babyface in WWE history, selling out Madison Square Garden crowds because that's where they primarily had their show. So that's why he would sell out so many crowds, and just being WWE's major franchise babyface that drew the crowds in. Bruno Sammartino fame wouldn't stop there. He'll be known among high dignitaries like the Pope and also movie stars like Frank Sinatra, and judging at Mr. Olympia competitions where Arnold Schwarzenegger was featured and actually where Arnold Schwarzenegger would win. This level of fame and crossover success and influence that Bruno Sammartino had on the entertainment world is what actually became a game changer. As far as passing the torch, I give him a 3 because he was supposed to drop the belt to Bob Backlund as the new up-and-coming face, but that task will be handed over to superstar Billy Graham. Coming in at number 4, we have the People's Champion, The Rock. As far as promos, I give him a 5, feuds a 5, championship reigns a 3, era a 3, passing of the torch, I give a 5. Let's break down the reason for his grades. So The Rock is definitely a 5 all around. If you've seen any of The Rock's promos, legendary. Do I really need to go into any explanations as to why I gave The Rock 5 points for his promo skills? His top 2 reference promos, Chris Jericho's first debut on Monday Night Raw, and second, the promo he cut against Kane. And a bonus, the promo he cut against Billy Gunn as well. As far as feuds, I gave him a 5. Name any time The Rock has feuded with anyone and that feud did not entertain you. But as far as his most notable feuds for feuding for the WWE Championship is John Cena, Mankind, Triple H, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Kurt Angle. Need I say more? And I almost forgot CM Punk. As far as championship reigns are concerned, I had to give him a 3 because he had very short title reigns. Him and Edge will go down in history as being notorious transitional champions. I mean, they will hold the belts for a maximum time of a month and then just give the belt back to the opponent they were actually feuding with or transfer it over to someone else. But the sad part about it is that The Rock never really had a title reign that lasted more than 4 months. Nevertheless, that did not stop The Rock's entertainment value. The Rock still was always entertaining, whether he held on to that belt or whether he lost the belt. The only reason for his low rating is because of his short title reigns. Other than that, it would be a lot higher. He was the first movie star in WWE history to ever hold on to a WWE Heavyweight Championship. That's right, The Rock was a movie star. Upon beating CM Punk at the Royal Rumble for his Heavyweight World Championship, The Rock became World Champion and he was a bona fide movie star. That's history. That was monumental. Never been done. Plus being a pro wrestler. As far as era, The Rock, he was streamlining the Attitude Era, but however, he was part of the Attitude Era. He helped push the Attitude Era. And when Stone Cold Steve Austin took that yearly sabbatical and him and Triple H were the 2 major draws on the show, they carried the show and carried the ratings. I had to give him a 3. I probably should give him a higher rating because, you know, they actually did carry the show. You know what? I'm going to give him a higher rating. I definitely got to give him a 4. Because honestly, when The Rock and Triple H were actually feuding for the belts on Monday Night Raw and on SmackDown, every week the ratings were actually high. As far as passing the torch, The Rock wouldn't have any issue putting over anyone as far as losing the belts to newcomers such as Kurt Angle, Brock Lesnar, and John Cena. And he would lose clean without an issue. So automatically I had to give him a 5. Coming in at number 3, I have none other than The Game, Triple H. His promo works, I give a 5. His feuds, a 5. Championship reigns, a 5. Era, a 5. And passing the torch, I gave a 3. Let's break down his grades. Triple H was always great on the mic. He was always a straight shooter. Most of the times, he didn't have, funny catchphrases or he didn't have a lot of witty punchlines, but a lot of times he did work the crowds with his straightforward demeanor, his constant taunting and teasing of the crowd, and always constantly being that big bad heel that a lot of the fans really needed. and also with his manipulative tactics that went into play with the storyline. So he was always great at storytelling with his promos and also his in-ring work combined. As far as his feuds, of course, it's a 5. His feuds with Mick Foley, The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Randy Orton, Chris Jericho, and of course, John Cena. Triple H's most notable feuds with The Rock and Mick Foley would solidify him as being the top heel in WWE. Triple H's legendary feud with The Rock during 1999 all the way to 2000 would prove to be highly successful, as their major babyface Stone Cold Steve Austin would be missing from in-ring action for more than a year. As far as championship reigns are concerned, the first word that comes to mind when I see Triple H is elevation. After being World's Heavyweight Champion and forming the group DX, all the team members would all elevate to championship status. Triple H will be the first heel in WWE history to walk in as a champion and leave as a champion. Triple H will also go on to be World Heavyweight Champion, taking Roman Reigns' title at a Royal Rumble while leading the Authority. As far as eras are concerned, between January 2000 and April 2000, we had the Helmsley-McMahon era, whereas for a short period of time, Stephanie McMahon and Triple H face will be plastered on a Monday's Night Raw venue for about 2 weeks or a month. As far as passing the torch is concerned, Triple H never really had to pass the torch because, again, he was a heel. Heels are always passing the torch over to the next big babyface or a worthy babyface. But as far as passing the torch, I give him a 3. And also, Triple H was one of the guys that was responsible for the Attitude Era alongside Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold Steve Austin. So for him to streamline the Attitude Era also into him being a heavyweight world's champion, and then to have his own era cut out of the Attitude Era, that in itself was amazing. Now honestly, ask yourself, name one bad WWE heavyweight title reign that Triple H has had since winning it in 1999. Name one. You can't. As heel or face, he's had great runs. And not only that, there's always been some great stories surrounding that WWE Championship every time he held it. Which brings us to number 2, Stone Cold Steve Austin. As far as promos, I gave him a 5, feuds a 5, championship reigns a 4, era a 5, passing the torch a 2. Now let's break this down. As considered the GOAT, or considered possibly one of the greatest in-ring performers in WWE history, I had to rank him at number 2, and I'll explain why exactly. Stone Cold Steve Austin, of course, is a game changer and was a game changer. Known for cutting some of the most legendary promos ever as far as the beer bash, constantly stunning Vince McMahon, and also his promo work with Iron Mike Tyson that helped save the business. The guy who was known as the superstar who helped save WWE from going out of business. I had to say that Stone Cold Steve Austin promos are legendary and classic. At any given time, you can go back and watch Stone Cold Steve Austin's old promos and get some of the greatest laughs in WWE history. As far as feuds are concerned, I give his feuds a 5. His most notable feuds is with Vince McMahon and The Rock, and then Shawn Michaels. Those are his most popular feuds or most notable feuds. Now, the reason why I give his feuds a 5 is because his most notable feuds with Vince McMahon and The Rock were like the biggest highlights of the Attitude Era. Now, The Rock and Austin, I mean, these guys headlined WrestleMania for 2 WrestleManias, and at no point did any of the fans or the WWE universe ever get tired of watching those guys go head to head. They even had a third match. It wasn't surrounding the world's heavyweight title, but however, it was just meant to close the chapter in their legendary rivalry. Other than that, I mean, you know, Stone Cold didn't really have a lot of like major high profile feuds. I mean, other than The Rock, Vince McMahon, and Triple H, you know, partially, like he didn't really have anybody else to really like go head to head with, you know, other than him taking the belt off of Shawn Michaels. Like a lot of times when he held the belt, he just held the belt, went out there, stunned people, drunk beer, and just did his usual, you know, 1, 2, 3. But the reason for him getting a 5 rating is because the feuds were that good that they can carry a whole show. As far as championship reigns, I had to give him a 4. The reason why I gave him a 4 is because Austin didn't have a lot of lengthy title reigns. So like some of his reigns would be 90 days, some of his reigns would be 50 days, and then his longest reign to date would be 175 days. You would think as far as him being one of the biggest draws, he would have lengthier title reigns, but the reason being it was because he had, you know, chronic issues with his neck. Sometimes it had nothing to do with his neck. It just had to do with just, bad storytelling on Vince McMahon's half. But as far as championship reigns, I had to give him a 4 because he was one of the guys who helped usher in the Attitude Era. He wasn't the main guy who did, but he was one of the guys who did. So I had to give him a 4 because during his championship reign, that's when the Attitude Era actually continued to boom. And it was partly because of Stone Cold Steve Austin's title reign and his feud with Shawn Michaels that WWE would see continued success and begin to win the Monday Night Wars against WCW. Of course, as far as era is concerned, I give him a 5, of course, because of the Attitude Era. As far as passing of the torch, a little known fact is that Stone Cold Steve Austin never passed the torch to anybody. The only person that ever beat Stone Cold Steve Austin clean in the ring was Kurt Angle. Anybody else that beat Stone Cold Steve Austin clean in the ring for a WWE title, non-existent. It's only one person. That was Kurt Angle. To show you like how arrogant he was as far as putting people over clean, even in that match against Kurt Angle when he's tapping out, you can see Stone Cold Steve Austin's hand clearly grabbing the apron, where he has enough room to grab the rope, but he doesn't grab the rope. He just grabs the apron and doesn't grab the rope and taps out. Why? And I do understand the whole importance of the match because it was in the reminiscence of the 9/11 victims who had suffered in the plane crash. But again, Austin could have tapped out a lot more cleaner and a lot more believable. Stone Cold Steve Austin would be considered one of the saviors of WWE, leading the Attitude Era, saving the WWE in its ratings war against WCW in the Monday Night Wars. He would also go on to shatter records and break records in merchandise selling. Speaking of Monday Night Wars, that leads me to the #1 spot, Hulk Hogan. Now, before you get mad and get pissed and stop the video, just hear me out. I guarantee you, I'll make a convincing case that is worth listening to and considering him the GOAT. Just listen. Let me just get into his grades and then I'll get into the case and let you guys go. As far as his promos, I give him a 5. His feuds, a 5. Championship reigns, a 5. Era, a 5. Passing of the torch, I give him a 5. There's a saying that some people who did it first did it worse, but then there's some people who did it first and did it better. Hogan was absolutely that guy. Hulk Hogan would be the first to set sales records in WWE that would take years to be surpassed by Stone Cold Steve Austin. Hulk Hogan will go on to help the WWE sell out shows in arenas and set countless records for sold out arenas in WWE, the first WWE superstar to ever cross over to Hollywood. Before Hulkamania ran wild, Hulk Hogan would make a popular appearance in Rocky III, thus catapulting Hulkamania. From there, he would make the movie Nose Hold Bar as being a well-known professional wrestler, now making movies. There's no doubt about it that Hulk Hogan had a larger reach than Bruno Sammartino. Sports entertainment was actually built on Hulk Hogan's reign in WWE. The term sports entertainment had came into play as Hulk Hogan would be the WWE's champion. He would set the crossover movie tone as he would do movies before The Rock, John Cena, and Stone Cold Steve Austin. He would set the merchandise selling record that Stone Cold Steve Austin and John Cena would eventually break. But it's kind of hard to look at Stone Cold Steve Austin as the biggest merch seller of the Attitude Era when Stone Cold Steve Austin was in direct competition of, you guessed it, Hulk Hogan. Around the time the Attitude Era had boomed in WWE, the NWO was already ahead by a year in '96 as Hogan would turn heel and cross back over to the dark side. That's right, Hogan was a heel prior in his early career as a wrestler, but then making that face turn is what made him more popular, especially starring in that Rocky role. The NWO running things on WCW would be direct competition to WWE's Attitude Era. Hogan led 2 eras in wrestling and 2 of the greatest eras in wrestling. Before WWE decided to even go all in with Attitude and Vince McMahon would allow his performers to do whatever they want, such as Stone Cold Steve Austin, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and Bret the Hitman Hart, WCW was doing it first, and they were doing it with Hogan, Nash, and Hall. What does this have to do with him being a WWE champion? Well, his direct star power of helping WWE being created and being built was the same star power that was able to be used in WCW in almost putting WWE out of business. A major dispute between Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan would see those two go at odds, and Vince McMahon resorting to damn near try to erase Hulk Hogan from the history books. As far as the records he set, as far as what he actually did to help build the business. Today, though there is controversy surrounding Hulk Hogan's name as being a former world champion, there are other former world champions who have just as much controversy surrounding their names. It's all dismissed like those performers did nothing wrong at all. But let's get back to the grade card. As far as promos, of course, Hulk Hogan gets a 5. Why? Because when we talk about popular catchphrases or even catchphrase itself, he was one of the pioneers or one of the front runners of catchphrases in wrestling. Say your prayers, eat your vitamins, what you want to do when the 24-inch pythons come down on you. The catchphrase gimmick would be something that a lot of wrestlers in the early 90s and the early 2000s would use to catch more heel heat or babyface heat. As far as feuds are concerned, feuds are 5. His feud with Andre the Giant, his feud with Macho Man with the Mega Powers exploding, 2 major baby faces actually main eventing at a WrestleMania, the top show. They were the first 2 major baby faces to ever main event at a WrestleMania. You know, Hulk Hogan's feuds will lay the groundwork for Superstars, and then eventually that became Monday Night Raw and other major pay-per-views and other buy rate shows. Hulk Hogan was actually the original IWGP champion. That's right, New Japan Pro Wrestling champion. He was the original champion. But that championship belt was won in the tournament, so it was deactivated, and they created a new one, which will be defended on pay-per-views and shows. And yes, he was WWE's heavyweight champion while he was a New Japan Pro Wrestling champion. His championship reigns, I give a 5, of course, because they were all monumental. Became New Japan Pro Wrestling champion, established sports entertainment, established WrestleMania, established major shows like Royal Rumble and Survivor Series. Through Hogan's star power, a whole new genre of sports was created, sports entertainment that had not existed until Hogan. You cannot say WWE and not think of Hulk Hogan, and you cannot say Hulk Hogan and not think of WWE all in the same sentence. Hogan set the tone for a golden era. He brought us out of the bygone era where you had champions who reigned for immense long times and didn't pass the torch on to anyone else. As far as passing the torch, let's speak about that. Hulk Hogan was the first to really pass the torch on to a major babyface on the rise. Bruno Sammartino wouldn't do it for Bob Backlund. Bob Backlund wouldn't do it for Hulk Hogan, but Hulk Hogan did it for Ultimate Warrior. And he didn't have a problem doing it because he knew that if he can put the title on someone who was just as over as he would, the company would last longer and they would have more matches and they would have more to look forward to in the future. Mind you, Hogan did all this while being a WWE heavyweight champion. And that is the reason why Hulk Hogan is the GOAT. So that concludes our video for today. But let me know what you guys think about this list. And who are your top 10 WWE champions of all times? Drop a comment in the comment section below. I want to know who you guys rank as your top 10 WWE champions of all times. Also, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel as I continue to upload weekly and monthly videos surrounding WWE content. Alright guys, until next time, peace.